This week in Linux, we have a ton to talk about. First, Linux Mint is modernizing their default theme. Then we have a new release of Hyprland, the tiling window manager. We've also got 3 new distros to talk about, and there's a new release from the Home Assistant project, as well as the Mesa drivers. And GNOME announced their new executive director this week, and that's not all. We've got all of that and more on This Week in Linux, the weekly news show that keeps you up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world. Now let's jump right into your source for Linux good news. This episode of Twill is sponsored by Sandfly Security. More on them later. In the next release of Linux Mint, they plan to add some blue to their default theme, especially with the windows. So in Linux Mint 22.2, they will be blue, da-ba-dee-da-ba-da. Let's take a look at what's coming in version 22.2, codename Sarah. So first up, the visual refresh that users will probably, maybe, possibly notice. It's kind of subtle. The team is introducing a steel blue tint to the gray base in Mint Y in an effort to make it look more modern and somewhat metallic, which follows some trends and, the likes of Apple, Firefox, and GNOME. This small color adjustment improves consistency across GTK3 and GTK4 apps, helping Mint's desktop feel more current and cohesive, especially with the libadwaita apps. Mint is also taking a more cooperative stance towards libadwaita apps. Linux Mint has added custom libadwaita style sheets to its Mint Y and Mint X themes and patched libadwaita to ignore its own style sheet, making GTK4 apps visually align better with the system theme, which is nice, although I doubt the people who make libadwaita are going to be on board with that because, there was that whole project or website that was made about not theming apps for GNOME applications. It's called Stop Theming My App. Not Stop Theming My .app. So anyway, if you want to look more into that, I'll have it in the show notes. But rather than forking or downgrading apps, this approach brings better integration while reducing maintenance overhead for Mint, which I think sounds like a win-win for users and Mint. Though the people who make the apps in the libadwaita part, they might disagree with that. But, that's not all, though, because Mint now uses the Flatpaks to have influence from the accent color for the theming. So this changes the accent color in Flatpak libadwaita applications based on your chosen GTK theme. So with more apps using GTK4/libadwaita, this lets Flatpaks blend in with your desktop, maintaining a unified look and feel. So that's quite nice. Also, Linux Mint is welcoming PewDiePie to the community. So PewDiePie is now using Linux Mint on his desktop. A lot of the time on his video was spent talking about his art setup, but he also mentioned that he uses Linux Mint for his desktop because ricing your system can be a lot of fun, but also takes a lot of time, so you'd probably want to do it one time, one machine, and not every machine. That's just my take. He didn't really say that. It's just my take. But I do think it's interesting to point out what Mint said in their blog post. They say that we have a new user. How many of us now? We don't count. Dozens at least. Dozens. Welcome to Linux, PewDiePie. And that's good. It's kind of fun that they're giving a nod to PewDiePie and that sort of thing. But I do think that there's an underlying issue here. We don't count. How many of us now? We don't count. This is actually a problem in my opinion. I think we should count it because us having an information about how many people are using Linux would be very helpful to convince people to make software for Linux. And if we don't count it because we just choose not to count it, then, I know the whole dozens is like a joke, but the whole we don't count, I kind of implore Linux Mint, consider counting because I think it would be very valuable information. You can count in a very respectful way to the user rather than just collecting all the data that other operating systems do. There is ways to do it properly. So just consider it. And other distros also consider it because the more data we have that shows how many people are using the platform, the better it is to get more development and more companies interested in the platform, at least in my opinion. So that's Linux Mint 22.2. It's shaping up pretty nicely with the subtle theme changes, better app integration, and all that sort of stuff. And whether you're on team GTK3 or GTK4, Mint's working to make sure it just all looks good and works. So that's good. Speaking of PewDiePie, in his video, which I reacted to, and you should totally watch my reaction video, He showed off his Arch Linux setup, which is powered by Hyprland. And it just so happens that Hyprland dropped version 0.49 this week, so let's talk about it. This update isn't just about tweaks. They are introducing a pretty cool security and permission system for apps, as well as a few more things. Starting with the biggest shift, the permission management is landing in Hyprland. So Hyprland 0.49 release brings pop-ups to ask for permission to do things. Think taking a screenshot and that sort of stuff. This kind of thing might remind you of the stuff that happens in Android and iOS, and I think it's a pretty good idea. Some distributions are bringing this in themselves, some DEs are doing it, and I think it's a good idea to have this sort of options. Not necessarily, it depends on how you do it. You can ask too many and just annoy people, so I guess it depends on what kind of features, but I think it's a good idea overall. Hyprland now lets you approve or deny access, boosting desktop security and user control. It is disabled by default, but it is a good leap forward, and if you want to turn it on, you can. There's also some new protocol goodies baked into this release. Hyprland now supports XDG System Bell and XDG Top Level Tag, the latter being useful for apps like Chrome that use advanced window management. These additions help bring Hyprland closer to full Wayland protocol compatibility, improve app interoperability, and system behavior consistency, especially for things like system notifications and some browser features. This release is also packed with a lot of small but meaningful upgrades. You can now disable keybinds per device, bind click and drag actions separately, tweak group bar visuals, and make use of new window rules like no follow mouse and no close for. Whether you have multiple input devices or want to fine-tune the behavior of your window groups or mouse actions, this update offers even more ways to tailor your desktop environment to your specific wants and needs, which is pretty cool. And of course, there are the usual stability improvements, like a lot of bug fixes and crash patches and stuff like that round out the release. So you get a smoother and more reliable experience with Hyprland. Even with all the new features, it's nice to see some focus on polishing what's already there. That's a quick look at Hyprland 0.49 with protocol progress and per app permission controls and lots of stuff. It's looking pretty good for this modern Wayland compositor. And if you like tiling window management, all of the eye candy and more, then check out the links in the show notes for more details. But also keep in mind, this is not for everyone. PewDiePie showed a lot of the fun he was having with it and all the stuff you can do with it, but he didn't show all the pain that he had to go through. He sort of mentioned it because of the function keys, and some of those function keys don't work because of some stuff in Hyprland, depending on the hardware and that sort of stuff. So keep in mind, Hyprland is very cool, but it's not for beginners to Linux. So if you're a beginner, you try something else. Maybe Mint or Zorin or whatever else. I actually talked about this in a video that I made on my channel about getting started with Linux, so I'll have that linked in the show notes. The GNOME Foundation has just announced who will be taking the helm at the foundation as the new executive director. So let's meet the new head of the GNOME Foundation. The announcement reads, the GNOME Foundation is delighted to announce the appointment of Stephen Diebold as our new executive director. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. I think that's how you say it. Diebold steps into a crucial leadership role, and I, for one, am looking forward to what comes from this change. And by the way, Stephen, just real quick, app indicators, also known as system tray menus. Just putting it out there. So who is Stephen Diebold? Well, they say on the announcement that Stephen has been a GNOME user since 2002 and has been involved in numerous free software initiatives throughout his career. His professional background spans technical leadership, cooperative business development, and nonprofit work. His deep roots in open source and business seems to make him a well-equipped person to handle the complexities of GNOME's nonprofit and technical ecosystem. In fact, Diebold is already laying out his goals. He plans to focus on increasing transparency about the people and the process behind GNOME, reestablishing the foundation's financial stability, and building resilience across finances, people, documentation, and processes. A more transparent, financially sound GNOME Foundation means better tools and more stability for users and developers alike. So who wouldn't be on board for that? Accessibility may also get a much-needed spotlight. Accessibility matters to everyone. You might not think it does, but it does, because benefiting people who need accessibility features will also benefit others based on the technology that is involved in creating those supports for those features. And as a leader who cares about it enough to specifically call it out in his introduction, that is pretty cool. And as Wayland adoption grows and GUI complexity increases, keeping accessibility in the forefront is just fantastic because it ensures that GNOME remains usable for everyone now and also in the future. So good job there. And a quick thanks to the people who were involved in the beginning, because the guy who kept the foundation afloat in the meantime, the GNOME Foundation says they extend the deepest gratitude to Richard Littauer. I probably said that wrong, sorry, who has served as the interim executive director for the past 10 months. And his behind-the-scenes work brought stability during like a difficult transition time, so that's really good. So thanks, Richard, and thanks for helping lay the groundwork for Steven's leadership. And I applied for the position for executive director of GNOME. For those who don't know, I did. And well, the pressure's on, Steven, because I'll be watching. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I will be watching because I make a news show, and it's kind of required for me to do that. But good luck. I hope you do well. And oh yeah, did I mention app indicators? If I didn't, app indicators. As Linux users, we know what's up. Security is non-negotiable, but with threats getting smarter, your security tools need to keep pace, without dragging your system down, of course. And traditional agents, they slow you down, they leave blind spots. It's just not great. It's time for a smarter approach. And that's why This Week in Linux is proud to be sponsored by Sandfly Security, the revolutionary agentless platform designed for Linux. Sandfly doesn't just detect and respond. It revolutionizes security with SSH key tracking, password auditing, and drift detection, covering threats from every angle. Whether your systems are in the cloud, on-premises, or in embedded devices, Sandfly ensures they're all secure without the headaches of agent-based solutions. Listen to what Ken Kleiner, the senior security engineer at the University of Massachusetts, has to say. He says Sandfly is the first product he's seen that accurately and quickly detects thousands of signs of compromise on the Linux platform. Its unique method automates tasks which would be manually impossible. Automation is key with detection, and Sandfly completely fits this and other requirements. If your organization is using Linux, this should be part of your cybersecurity toolset. So experience security that's not just effective, but gives you peace of mind. No agents, no downtime, just cutting-edge protection. Dive into the future of Linux security at thisweekinlinux.com/Sandfly. That's thisweekinlinux.com/SANDFLY. And see how Sandfly can transform your security strategy. And if you are as fascinated by cybersecurity as much as I am, go check out the interview we had with the CEO of Sandfly on Destination Linux podcast. We talk about his awesome story about how he got into Linux, how he got into security, how he started Sandfly Security, and so much more. Even DEF CON was a topic we covered. So check it out at destinationlinux.net/409. And also check out thisweekinlinux.com/Sandfly for more information about Sandfly Security. Mesa 25.1 has dropped, and it's packed with new features for gamers and developers and all sorts of stuff. So let's break down what's new and how it'll affect open source graphics as a whole. So let's dive into the key highlights of this release. I'm going to open the release announcement page, and we'll talk about all the stuff that is new. Oh, wait, it's a single sentence. Oh, technically two sentences, I guess. But really, there is a lot. It's interesting how they have this news post on their website, and then you go into the docs, and then you see this. An endless amount of stuff. Exactly. So we're going to see, I'm going to just have this scrolling and see how far we get down the page by the time we finish this topic. So let's go. All right, there we go. So Mesa 25.1 has officially been released, bringing a lot of improvements for both OpenGL and Vulkan support on Linux systems. The biggest news? Well, the Asahi driver is now fully mainlined into Mesa, eliminating the need for custom builds for Apple hardware. For Apple users, this means no more hassle with custom builds, and it's a huge step forward for better support on macOS and Linux systems. Now let's talk about the Vulkan features that steal the spotlight. So Mesa 25.1 introduces several Vulkan extensions across different drivers, including support for VKKHR depth stencil resolve, VKKHR sampler YCBCR conversion, and Vulkan 1.2 on Pan VK. It also improves ray tracing support in the Venus driver and adds low latency encoding for RAD-V or RAD5. For developers and gamers, this means enhanced performance and better compatibility with a wider range of applications and games, especially those requiring advanced Vulkan features. Of course, there's more under the hood with performance tweaks across the board. There are notable updates to the Panfrost and RAD-V drivers, improved support for ARM Mali, G720, G925 GPUs, and many new extensions for the PanVK driver like Storage Push Constant 16 and Shader Storage Image Extend formats. These improvements will make graphics performance smoother, especially for users running ARM-based devices and AMD hardware. Expect better handling of graphics-intensive tasks like gaming and 3D rendering. There's also some big news for NVIDIA users, especially with the Nouveau drivers. So Mesa 25.1 brings Vulkan conformance for Maxwell, Pascal, and Volta GPUs. With users with Turing and later GPUs will now get NVK plus Zinc by default for OpenGL instead of the old OpenGL driver. NVK plus Zinc is OpenGL 4.6 conformant, faster and more stable than the old GPL driver. And that means better support for NVIDIA users using the open source driver, which is just awesome. Finally, let's address some of the bug fixes that came with this release. Mesa 25.1 also fixed numerous issues across a range of games, including glitches in Cyberpunk 2077, Kingdom Come Deliverance, and WWE 2K23. There are also fixes for artifacts, performance regressions, and GPU hangs in several titles. And if you've been struggling with graphical issues in any of these kinds of games, the release should offer a smoother experience. Mesa 25.1 is an exciting release with lots of improvements for Linux users, and whether you're into gaming or development, there is a ton of stuff in this release, and this is very impactful, especially for those who have NVIDIA drivers or NVIDIA hardware, as well as the Asahi stuff is just fantastic. So if you want to learn more about this, you can check out the links in the show notes. And now let's look at what progress we have on the release notes or the documentation notes. Okay, we have scrolled the entire time, skipped a little because of the edits as well, and we are still maybe 15-20% down the list of everything that's on here. Because if I go a little bit faster, you'll see it just keeps going and going and going. And that's actually so fast it's hard to read anything, and it's still not even 40% down the list. Anyway, it's a lot of stuff to go through. So I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did appreciate going through all this stuff, be sure to subscribe to the show and the channel. I'd appreciate that. Raspberry Pi OS just dropped what may be its final bookworm-based update, and it's packing better Wayland support, touchscreen improvements, and a fresh look at security. So first up, this is probably the final release of the Raspberry Pi OS, which is based on Debian Bookworm, before Debian goes into Trixie, which will be released this summer. That makes it the last major checkpoint before a bigger base upgrade. There's a new lock screen experience on this release as well. Raspberry Pi OS now uses a modified version of SwayLock with a custom front end that gives users a feedback and password box when they lock the screen, which is very nice. It's a major usability improvement over the blank white screen that left users kind of confused before. Alongside that, Raspberry Pi OS now separates auto login for better security, and they say that we have now separated console and desktop auto login options. We recommend turning off console auto login. This fixes a potential security flaw where a locked desktop could be bypassed using an auto login TTY session. Managing printers is getting much better in this release of Raspberry Pi OS because there's a new standalone printers application which replaces the system config printer with a cleaner, easier interface to use that is ported from GNOME. So this simplifies printer setup and management, especially for newer users. Wayland users will notice improved touchscreen behavior because users can now choose between mouse emulation and native touchscreen input depending on their needs. It gives back features like swiping and scroll gestures that were lost with mouse emulation, but also lets you keep double tap support if needed. There's also UI tweaks for touchscreen users with multiple monitors. Squeakboard now lets users pick which display to show the virtual keyboard on. It's a helpful refinement for accessibility and usability in more complex setups. Also, it is no longer possible to pre-install the uBlock Origin ad blocker. They were pre-installing it, but they now have to pre-install the slightly less full-featured version of the uBlock Origin Lite. This is because, well, Chrome and Chromium-based browsers have basically a wrench thrown into it for ad blocking It's a pretty complicated topic that I might make a video about because it is going to annoy a lot of people, but it's just as basically just a heads up for users who rely on ad blocking out of the box. Thanks to Google, it's not as good as it used to be. The system itself is getting faster. Optimizations to WF Panel Pi and the replacement of Zenity with a custom tool called Zenoti, which they changed the I to an O, leads to faster desktop startup times, and these backend changes directly reduce boot and load times, which is a real benefit for low-powered devices. This release of Raspberry Pi OS looks like a solid update with better touch support to faster boot times and all sorts of stuff. Now, LXDE is the desktop that they use, and it's always been an interesting choice for me, in my opinion, that the Raspberry Pi team chose to use LXDE, even though it's not really maintained anymore outside of Raspberry Pi. But it seems to be working fairly well for them, so, I'll be sure to let you know what changes come on with the transition to Debian Trixie, which will happen later on, maybe this year, maybe not. It depends on when Debian gets their release out. So we'll see, and I'll keep you updated, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Home Assistant just crossed 2 million active installations, and they're celebrating with one of the most feature-packed updates we've seen yet. From smarter backups to Z-Wave long range and a massive UI overhaul, there's a lot to cover. We actually did a joke a little bit about the Mesa drivers and how much there was to talk about this one. Now, we're going to do the same thing about Home Assistant because it's also a giant one. We're just going to let it scroll, and wherever it lands when we're done, that's where we're going. Let's start with the big milestone and celebration. 2 million active installations of Home Assistant worldwide. It shows the scale and impact of Home Assistant now that it has globally is just awesome. And also, having this kind of data is good to know because now we know how popular it is. So, data tracking can be good, just so you know, those who listen to the previous topics in the show. Now let's dive into the May 2025 release. The latest update delivers major upgrades to backups, text-to-speech, UI entity pickers, Z-Wave support, plus a ton of integration changes. It improves stability, usability, and customization for both new and power users. Backups just got much better. Users can now set a backup retention policy per location, create backups before upgrading, wait for backup completion on restarts, and set default backup behavior. This adds flexibility and reliability, especially for users managing backups across cloud and local storage. Then text-to-speech. Text-to-speech voices now come with style. You can now choose between different voices styles and tones, such as friendly, angry, sad, whisper, and others. It lets users personalize announcements and notifications to match, your mood or context or whatever. It's a bit of fun. It's also useful, but it's a bit of fun. I like it. Entity pickers have been overhauled. The picker UI now shows device and area context, offers smarter search, and optionally shows entity IDs. This massively improves navigation and reduces guesswork when building automations or configuring cards. Z-Wave takes a big leap forward with this release. The most exciting part of the release is the addition to Z-Wave long-range support. Devices like gate sensors or distant garage monitors can now connect reliably without mesh repeaters. Integrations get broader and deeper. New integrations include AnduinOS S3, Melee appliances, not sure how to say that, and Google Gemini. Existing integrations like YouTube, OpenAI, ChatGPT, HomeKit Bridge, and Xiaomi BLE received major improvements as well. It expands device support while leveling up current functionality, so it's key for users with complex smart homes or smart systems. Even YAML fans get some love in this release. Users can now paste YAML directly into the UI and get immediate conversion, no manual rebuilds required. It streamlines the workflow for power users and lowers the barrier for customizing shared automations. And also, network discovery gets much improvements. It gets transparent, in fact. New tools let users view what Home Assistant is detecting on the network via protocols like DHCP, MDNS, ZeroConf, and UPnP/SSDP. This helps diagnose missing devices or discover why something isn't showing up, which is super useful for advanced setups. Meanwhile, the Open Home Foundation continues expanding. The foundation now leads development on Home Assistant, ESP Home, ZigPi, I think it's ZigPi, and more, and also recently took some 39 developers from Nabu Casa By the way, that's fun to say, Nabukasa. It separates hardware cloud from software development and ensures more sustainable and community-led future. Recent updates also enhanced voice assistants and dashboards. April's release added a redesigned voice wizard, support for continued conversations, and a new auto-generated areas dashboard for easier control. And these improvements enhance both a voice interaction and UI simplicity, making Home Assistant even more user-friendly. So with millions of users and a maturing foundation and one of the most customizable smart home platforms out there, Home Assistant is proving it's not just an alternative. It's basically the future of open home automation. I think even the future of home automation. It is so cool. And if you've never checked it out, there's a little bit of a learning curve. It can do a ton of cool things, but you're going to have to dig into the documentation to get it all set up. Even if you're not even doing a super complex stuff, it's super powerful, and that means that there's a lot of stuff that you'll need to learn how to do because it also integrates really well with various different technologies. But if you're brand new to the idea of home automation, it's a great tool, but there is a little bit of a barrier to entry. Now let's check in to see where we are on the documentation for this blog post. And hey, we got farther down this one. It looks like 40%. Yeah, so 40% down the page for all the stuff that is happening. Oh, now I won't even scroll correctly. But anyway, there's a lot of cool stuff in here. So go check it out. Home Assistant 2025.5 release. If you've ever wondered how Linux distributions get built behind the scenes, well, that's more of a video all in its own. So I'm not going to talk about that, but we're going to talk about some stuff related to building distributions here. But if you'd like to know more about that, let me know in the comments because I might make a video about how it all works and it might be interesting to do. Let me know if you're interested in that. But there's actually a new tool that's shaking things up in the development world, and it just might simplify the entire process for some distributions. We're going to talk about it related to CentOS, and that is Kurchu. Kurchu is a new tool that aims to make building Linux distro images more streamlined and declarative. Kurchu is a newer project within the CentOS Fedora space for assembling content collections or ISO images of Linux distribution builds. Unlike the older Punji tool, Kurchu uses a clean, config-driven approach that's easier to understand and modify. It's a huge win for teams building and managing distro artifacts. Kurchu is built around a clear three-phase structure to define every part of the compose process. These phases are gather, collect package repositories, compile, building images using tools like Kiwi and Koji, and furnish, publishing the final output to local and remote targets like S3. This separation gives maintainers flexibility and modularity in their workflows, and you can even skip steps if they're not needed. Kurchu is also already being used in production, including by one major CentOS variant, and that is the CentOS Hyperscale. SIG began using Kurchu in April for their CentOS Stream 9 and 10 derived collections. Kurchu is not just experimental, it's already delivering tested, production-grade images. A stable 1.0 release is also on the horizon. Once the configuration format is finalized and schema validation is added, Kurchu will hit version 1.0 with semantic versioning. A stable release means third parties can rely on it as a dependable foundation for long-term automation and tooling. Whether you're building full-fledged distros or just managing your own spins, Kurchu looks like a promising tool. And also with CentOS Hyperscale already on board, it's off to a strong start. That's not the only CentOS related news either, because they have announced the official mascot for CentOS. They have chosen a quokka. That's right, people. The love of quokkas is growing. I don't know if this mascot has a name yet, but it's certainly a great choice for a mascot, because quokkas are adorable. Apparently, they have been thinking about doing this for years now, but is it a coincidence that they chose to do it right after I expressed my heartfelt appreciation for the quokka? I guess we'll never know. Probably, but no, whatever, probably. So we're now into the section of the show where I'm talking about some new distributions that you may or may not have heard of. Some of them are new because they're just new distros. Some of them are not new and they've been around for years. So let's talk about them. First up, we're going to talk about PikaOS. Now, PikaOS is a gaming-focused distribution, and they said that they emphasize ease of use and high compatibility. It is built on top of Debian, but with some cherry-picked and custom-compiled packages. They say that it ensures Pika is stable while it's also being bang up to date. That's their words, bang up to date. So it's gaming-focused. It includes drivers for optimal hardware support and also performance tuned for speed, as they say. And let's talk about the latest release, the update for PikaOS IV, 2025.5 ISO is the way they describe it. So it's an interesting way of declaring versions. So let's talk about what's in the latest release of PikaOS, which is apparently PikaOS IV 2025.5 ISO is the way they describe it. And the latest release has kernel 6.14.5 with NT-Sync built in, PikaFetch included by default. I'm not sure what PikaFetch is. I'm not actually sure. There's a few things they have, like custom-made things. Maybe I'm guessing maybe PikaFetch is like Fast Fetch or NeoFetch, but their custom version. Also, they have updated Mesa drivers, updated firmware. They've updated the GNOME desktop to GNOME 48.1, and the KDE Plasma desktop has been updated to KDE Plasma 6.3.4, as well as many other packages. Although they say that there's 180,000 packages that were updated, that doesn't seem like the right number. That doesn't seem right. Maybe 18,000, but I don't know. Maybe. Who knows? So this is an interesting distribution because PikaOS Linux is a distro that is, well, it's made to have multiple different editions. So you have the GNOME edition, you have the KDE Plasma edition. They also have a Hyprland edition, which is interesting. And it's based on Debian, which is not known for having the latest up-to-date hardware, but they say that they have cherry-picked some stuff that is more up-to-date to make it work. So it's probably a combination of Debian stable, Debian testing, and Debian SID to make it all work, to get like the latest Mesa drivers and that sort of stuff. So that's interesting. It still probably isn't the most up-to-date because, you know, it's still Debian. Even some of the times there's stuff that is just not in Debian for a while. So they look at it as like the most up-to-date version or anything like that, because I don't think there is a possibility to make Debian super up-to-date. But it is very cool as a concept to take the Debian base and then modify it to do this sort of stuff. There has been some efforts to try this before. It didn't work out. So I'm very curious to see what PikaOS has. I've never tried it myself, so I might give it a spin after this show. After further examination, it looks like it is based on Debian SID, and then they pull in custom patches to have the hardware and software support. So what those patches are and where they come from, that part has not been specified, but it might be from like the experimental branch of Debian or somewhere else, something like that. Maybe they pull in some kernels from other distributions, and maybe something like that would be interesting to see. I'd like to do some more research for a future coverage. Maybe I'll do like a video of my experience with Pika. So we'll see about that. But now we know Debian SID is the main base. Plamo or Plamo Linux 8.2 has been released. And for those who are unfamiliar, this is a classic Japanese distro, and it just dropped a brand new version that's been in the works for a couple of years now. So for those who are wondering why I'm saying it is Japanese, let me just turn off the auto translator and show original. And there you go. That's what it looked like before I translated it. Plamo 8.2 features kernel update to 6.12.21. GCC was updated to 14.2. LLVM was updated to 19.1. Mesa was updated to 25.0.4. XFCE was updated to 4.20. They have LXQT 2.1 in this release, and also Mate 1.28, as well as an update to the FFmpeg project with 7.1.1. and also many, many more things. These updated packages brings performance improvements, hardware compatibility, just a lot more, including more improvements for like a modern desktop experience. The ISO is a bit bulkier this time, but for good reasons. Due to increased capacity, the DVD release is now split into 3 ISOs, with each containing specific sets of packages for like XFCE, Mate, and also Tech, or TEX, but pronounced Tech. This modular packaging gives us more flexibility when choosing what components they want to install. But not all the changes are additions. They've also removed some stuff. They say that unnecessary network-related tools and tools at the time of installation were removed. Firmware that does not seem to be directly related to the installation will also not be included. And this cleans up and basically streamlines the installer. but it also may lead to some hardware compatibility issues depending on the configuration, especially for users who rely on specific, like certain types of firmware. You might need to address that. Also, this latest release has a new convenient option for users to easily make a live USB or a USB boot. And this is for modern UEFI systems, and it provides flexibility for rescue and installation purposes with full firmware support. So Plamo Linux is not just a Japanese distribution, it's also basically the Japanese Slackware because it is based on Slackware style of stuff. So if you're into that kind of hands-on Slackware style of Linux with rolling updates and that sort of thing, then you might want to check it out. Mel, I'm not sure if they have English translations of their system. You might not. I just think it's a cool thing to talk about because it's been around for a very long time, and I had just heard of it recently, just a couple months ago, so I wanted to talk about it. I wanted to tell you about an interesting distribution called AnduinOS because they have a new release of AnduinOS 1.3, and also it's a custom Ubuntu-based Windows 11-like Linux distribution developed by a Microsoft engineer. That's a lot to say. So this is really interesting because, well, it looks a lot like Windows 11. I mean, a lot. Like a lot. Probably too much, in fact. We'll get to that in a second. But first up, the latest release of AnduinOS brings some exciting updates with the newest major upgrades being an app store based on Flatpak, a system-based upgrade from Oracular, Ubuntu 24.10, to Plucky, Ubuntu 25.04, which means all the benefits of the underlying base is going to be bringing in, including the updated kernel and Mesa drivers and all that sort of stuff, and new shortcuts like Super V to toggle clipboard history, which is really cool to see because by default, GNOME does not come with any kind of clipboard manager, and a lot of distributions don't come with clipboard managers, and I feel like if you've never used a clipboard manager, you should. They're fantastic. I'm thinking about making a video about that, so feel free to subscribe because if you don't know what those are, you will want to know because they are awesome. Anyway, it also adds GNOME software pre-installed to support software installation directly from the software store. For users, this means better software management and a more feature-rich experience straight out of the box. Whether you're a fan of Flatpak or just want a smoother system, these changes make Anduin a compelling option for Linux enthusiasts. Now, let's take a deeper look at how AnduinOS came to be and what makes it so interesting. Now, I don't know if I'm saying Anduin correctly, that's just the way I imagine it's pronounced, but AnduinOS was started as a personal project by Anduin, the sole maintainer, who initially crafted it as a lightweight, customized Ubuntu system for himself. What started as a toy turned into something much larger, catching the attention of the Linux community and even landing on DistroWatch. Sometimes the simplest ideas can resonate with a larger community, and this is kind of like an example of how personal and hobby-driven projects can grow and get influence on, many more communities, members, and stuff like that. So it's very cool in that sense. But not everyone is convinced by AnduinOS. They have a minimal approach, which is kind of cool. Many critics label AnduinOS as a minimal effort rather than as just simply rebranding Ubuntu with a Windows-like theme. However, the project gained popularity precisely because of its minimalism, and the developers' transparency and open source nature appealed to some users. Now, in my case, I'm kind of wondering about the future of the project because this is very interesting. But as you can see with the screenshot, it looks a lot like Windows 11, like a lot like Windows 11. So I don't know if this is actually even legal to be so close to it. It looks, just zoom in a little bit, but it's actually hidden after I zoomed in. Okay, that's not good. There we go. That's close enough. So this looks so close that it might not be okay. And this also is someone who works for Microsoft, so that's confusing too. But it's interesting, to say the least. So I feel like there's some value in having a distribution that looks like Windows, but also I feel like there's also a lot of negatives that could be associated to that, because if someone thinks that it's basically Windows, they might feel like it's, like a broken version of Windows or something like that, where it's if it's too close to Windows, it might make them think that it will work like Windows when it most certainly will not. So I'm kind of torn by how far do you go into the space of making it seem like a Windows paradigm and a Windows-like experience, versus going so far that it makes people think that it's, almost Windows or something like that. And it's an interesting topic to discuss, but we don't really have time for that. Maybe we'll do that on my podcast, Destination Linux. Be sure to subscribe to my podcast, Destination Linux, at destinationlinux.net. Maybe we'll talk. Actually, I think we will talk about that. So now that I've considered that, yeah, we're going to do that. Not the next episode because we already recorded that one, but the one after that, I'm pretty sure we're going to have a discussion about this kind of thing. Thanks for watching this episode of This Week in Linux. If you'd like what I do here on the show and want to be kept up to date with what's going on in the Linux and open source world, then be sure to subscribe. And of course, remember to like that smash button. If you'd like to support the show and the Tux Digital Network, then consider becoming a patron by going to tuxdigital.com/membership. We're going to get a bunch of cool perks like access to the patron-only section of our Discord server and much, much more. You can also join me in the patron-only Skybox during the recording of the show during the live stream, which happens every Friday. And also, after the show's done, you can join me in the patron-only post-show just by becoming a patron at tuxdigital.com/membership. Plus, there's a bunch of other cool stuff, including discounts at our store. That's right, we have a store, tuxdigital.com/store, where you can support the show by ordering the Linux is Everywhere t-shirt. The Linux is Everywhere, I realize I said that very fast. Linux is Everywhere t-shirt, the This Week in Linux shirt that I'm wearing right now. Plus, while you're there, check out all the other cool stuff we have like hats, mugs, hoodies, and so much more. tuxdigital.com/store. I'll see you next time for another episode of your source for Linux news. Thanks again for watching. I'm Michael Tennell. I hope you're doing swell. Be sure to ring that notification bell. And until next time, I bid you farewell.